गुड इवनिंग एंड वेरी वार्म वेलकम टू द ब्लैक होल। दरिया सिर्फ पानी के बहाव का नाम नहीं होते, बल्कि ये ज़मीनों को सैराब और ज़रख़ेज़ करते हैं और यूँ ज़िंदगी की इलामत हैं, मुईशत का इंजन है, तहज़ीबों को जन्म देते हैं और सकाफ़त की नब्ज़ हैं। आज हमारा मौजू भी कुछ इसी तरह का है, यानी 1960 में भारत और पाकिस्तान के माबैन तय पाने वाला सिंतास मुआहदा या इंडस वाटर्स ट्रीटी, समथिंग that has often been hailed as a rare success story of cooperation between two bitter rivals. कुछ मुबसरीन, हाँ ये मैं इजाफ़ा करता जाऊँ कि इसकी फेयरनेस पर काफ़ी संजीदा नोयत के सवाल भी उठाते हैं, लेकिन आज वो हमारा मौजू नहीं है। आज हम बात करेंगे सानिया पहलगाम, जिस पर हम सब के दिल रंजीदा हैं। उसके कॉन्टेक्स्ट में भारतीय हुकूमत का फ़ैसला जिसमें वो इंडस वाटर्स ट्रीटी को सस्पेंड कर रही है, उसके हवाले से आज हम गुफ्तगू करेंगे और हम देखेंगे कि सारे कज़िये में हमारे लिए कोई खैर के इम्कानात हैं या नहीं है। एंड हैज़ द टाइटल दैट यू कैन रीड ऑन द बोर्ड, जो मेरी पुश्त पे आपको नज़र आएगा, सस्पेंशन ऑफ इंडस वाटर्स ट्रीटी बाय इंडिया एन अपॉर्चुनिटी टू फिक्स द इल्स। और इस हसास मौजू पर गुफ्तगू के लिए वी हैव डॉक्टर हसन अब्बास विद अस, जो मेरे दाएं जानिब तशरीफ़ फरमा है। आप इन्हें जानते हैं कि इनकी डॉक्टरेट है इन हाइड्रोलॉजी एंड वाटर रिसोर्सेज फ्रॉम Michigan State University. Dr. Abbas has worked in water sector across 4 continents. In Pakistan, he was appointed as the first UNESCO chair for integrated water resources management. Dr. Hassan Abbas works for water, energy and environment sector. Very gracious of him, जब भी हम इनको ज़हमत देते हैं कि अपने इल्म से हमें मुस्तफ़ीद करें, तो ये हमेशा हमारे लिए वक्त निकालते हैं। आप लोगों की आमद का भी शुक्रिया। थोड़ी सी ज़हमत करके प्लीज़ अपने सेल फोन साइलेंट मोड में स्विच कर लें, सो दैट देयर इज़ नो डिस्ट्रैक्शन। गुफ्तगू के बाद, जैसा कि यहाँ की रवायत है, हाउस ओपन होता है फॉर Q&A। जब वो मरला आए तो आप इस मुकालमे का ज़रूर हिस्सा बनिएगा। जस्ट रेज योर हैंड फर्स्ट सो दैट दिस माइक्रोफोन इज़ गिवन टू यू ड्यूरिंग दी Q&A सेशन। शॉर्ट टू द पॉइंट रहिएगा ताकि हम गुफ्तगू हमारी मौजू के गिर्द ही रहे और ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा दोस्त अपना सवाल जो है डॉक्टर हसन अब्बास के सामने रख सकें। एंड दैट्स इट। प्लीज़ वेलकम डॉक्टर हसन अब्बास।
Assalamu alaikum and welcome everyone, and once again thanks to the Black Hole for inviting me to discuss this very important topic, which is now from national to international importance. It is about the world peace. It might impact 1/4 of the world's population because we are talking about Indus, and Indus originates from the Karakoram, Himalaya and Hindu Kush mountain ranges, and it serves a huge set of population on the planet. It serves the whole planet. It serves the planetary environmental system. It is the only river in the world which is significantly fed by glaciers, and it's one of the most amazing river systems in the world. But unfortunately, the development models which were applied to so-called take advantage of Indus in last almost 2 centuries are not compatible with the environmental requirements and the environmental services that Indus had been providing to the planet. I would always mention it, to the planet, not just the region, not just a country, not just a civilization, not just a province, but to the planet. Indus is a river system which is one of the most robust river systems in the world. It never runs dry. You might be listening to the news that Indus is running dry these days. There have been very graphic images of sand dunes in the riverbeds, especially downstream of Kotri. That is true, but it's not natural. It's all man-made. The disaster is totally man-made. On the day, Dawn published a story with a very graphic image where the Indus is running like a very small nala in the center of the riverbed. on the same day I checked up how much water the nature was actually giving to the Indus. Within the three rivers of Pakistan, it was like more than 60,000 cubic feet per second of flow. It was coming in Jhelum, Chenab, and the Indus, main Indus. And an estimated, safe estimate, at least 20,000 cusics of flow was coming in Ravi, Byas, and Satluj, which are also the tributaries of Indus, which originate from the Indian side. So it was more than 80,000 cusics of water being sent by nature into the river system, and yet downstream of Kotri, it was hardly 1 or 2 cusics. So that's the kind of that's the state of affairs. Where did all the water disappear? From the rim stations down to Kotri, it is diverted. Even if you travel to Lahore on the motorway, you cross a couple of canals. Some of them are link canals, some of them are irrigation canals, and you would never see those canals running dry. Those are perennial canals. They were always running full to the brim. That's where the water is being diverted. Some of the water is held up in the dams, which have been built as a consequence of Indus Waters Treaty. The development models that we started since the times of the British Raj of diverting the water into the plains and using it for irrigation might have been an acceptable idea back then, like 1850s. But later on, after the independence, we did not try to improve upon the management or the system or the development models of the river system. We completely ignored environment. And even though some people say that when this Indus Water Treaties was being negotiated between 70 to 60 years ago, environment was not on the top of world agenda, and nobody talked about environment, nobody knew about the environment. But that's really not the case. The environment, even at that time, was very much in the agenda. The first lawsuit on environmental basis on the construction of a dam dates back to 1913. That was when some authorities in California, they proposed 2 dams, one in Hetch Valley and one in Yosemite Valley. And the environmentalists, they made huge hue and cry. They signed petitions and they went to the courts, although they lost. But that is on record in the world that was when the first environmental lawsuit was made. And the lawsuit was not all that unsuccessful. They wanted to build 2 dams, and finally they decided to convert Yosemite Valley into a national park. Those who had been to USA and those who have visited this place, they know how beautiful Yosemite Valley is. Equally beautiful was Hetch Valley, but as the negotiations went ahead, they built a dam in Hetch Valley and they spared Yosemite Valley. And then if you read, there's a very famous book, a classic on investigative journalism. The book is titled The Cadillac Desert, written by Mark Reisner. He writes about the stories of almost all large dams which were built in the USA from like 1900 onwards, and every dam created some kind of environmental issue, and there had been debates about environment on the construction of those dams. So it is not that at that time when we were negotiating Indus Water Treaty, nobody cared about environment, nobody knew about environment. Who was building all those dams for us? The Americans. They knew it too well. If we didn't, they did. And for them, it was actually rather easy to suggest any dam, and that would be built without any opposition from the environmentalists in this part of the world. We were ignorant and they took advantage of it. Coming down to the Indus Waters Treaty. One of the problems with the Indus Water Treaty is the people who talk about it, who are the custodians of it, those who actually wrote this treaty and signed this treaty, they are all dead by now. But those who are the custodians and who are responsible to actually follow the treaty or run the countries according to the treaty, they hardly know anything about this treaty. Because the treaty has several components. One is those 80 odd pages which contain the various articles and annexures of the treaty. That is one. And it is written in obviously some kind of legal language. It was drafted by, of course, experts in law, so they wrote it. The other people, set of people who know a bit about the treaty, and they are the environmentalists, those who talk about the environment, the ecosystem and stuff. Then there are people who are directly impacted by the treaty, negative or positive, they are impacted by the treaty. And these are the farmers, the communities who are getting or not getting the due share of their water, the people whose rights have been violated because of this treaty. Then there are people whose environmental setup has been severely disrupted, like people living close to the river, living off the wetlands, living off the Indus Delta, mangrove forests. Then there are ecologists who can link the river from glaciers to delta and beyond delta into the ocean, how the species are connected, and all the way to Antarctica, all the way, the complete Indian Ocean. It had some ecological connection with Indus Delta. So the problem is when somebody talks about Indus Water Treaty and the person is a lawyer, he has not seen the impact of those clauses which are written in the treaty, how they translate on ground. For example, Article 4, para, I think 3 and 4, and para 8. If you look at these few paras, it's simple legal language written. A lawyer will read it and will move on to the next one without thinking that what does it mean on ground and how those 3 paras have manifested their impact on ground. Those 3 paras that I am referring to allow India to let 4 wastewater drains run across the border into Pakistan. And according to the treaty, those paras, they define the obligation of Pakistan that Pakistan as a public service will maintain those drains in a way that any obstruction coming into those drains would be cleared by Pakistanis as a public service, and the backwater curve of that wastewater should not go across the border into India. What would those wastewater drains will bring into Pakistan? There is no cap on the content or the quality of water which is coming into Pakistan. Then how much water they will bring in? The treaty says that on the effective day, which is reckoned as 1st of April 1960, the amount of water which was flowing in those 4 drains will be maintained by Pakistan. And if India wants to release more water, Pakistan is obliged to deepen or widen those drains in order to accommodate additional water. How much additional water? There is no cap on it. So this is something that unless you go and see on ground, you won't understand it. And then the people who are suffering from this, they don't know what the treaty is. They don't even know that these drains are coming because of the treaty. They haven't read the treaty. They don't have the resources. They have never been told that this is all because of that treaty, that you are getting this dirty water. And if you look at the satellite images, for example, there's this drain which is called Fazilka drain. It enters Pakistan somewhere close to the border near Bahawalpur. That's one of the biggest towns. And there's a big irrigation structure which is Sulaiman Ki Headworks. It's built on Satluj. Yeah, Sulaiman Ki Barrage. It is built on Satluj. And it is upstream of Satluj that the drain enters into Pakistan. And because of that headworks, there's a big lake and set of wetlands in the rivers. They extend a few miles upstream of that barrage. And that drain actually discharges everything into that pond. Now that pond is also connected by a link canal, which is Ballo Ki Sulaiman Ki link canal. And the water in Satluj is brought from the western rivers and it then mixes up with the water of those drains. I would encourage you to go to Google and just look at the Google images, zoom in, and you will see that big black plume which is several square kilometers wide within that pond, and it is being mixed with the water which is coming from the link canal, and then it gets distributed into the irrigation network and becomes part, whatever is in there becomes part of the food chain. And our children are growing by eating those foods which is grown there. They are also drinking water, which is basically because all our rural areas which are fed by canals, mostly people are dependent on the groundwater seepage from the canals. They have hand pumps close to the canals and stuff, and they are drinking that dirty water. Not everybody can afford bottled waters. So for 65 years, our children are drinking that water and eating that contaminated food. And nobody talks about it. Nobody is actually worried that this is an outcome of the treaty. But treaty allows it. You can't go to anyone as long as you are following the treaty. You can't go to any forum. You can't even ask the government of India directly that stop polluting our rivers, stop polluting our environment. They say you have signed it. You are supposed to maintain it. There's no cap on the quality and quantity of water that they can release. And it is just the story of Fazilka drain. There are 3 more drains which are mentioned in the treaty. One is Hudiara drain, which is close to Lahore. I think most people from Lahore, they have seen it. Just for a reference, if you enter into the Baria town, just before Baria town, there's a bridge on the road. And there's a very dirty drain which is under that bridge. That is Fazilka drain. Hudiara drain, sorry. That is Hudiara drain. And that Hudiara drain has an average flow of about 600 cusecs. It is twice the size of Lai River, which is here in Pindi and Islamabad. It's not trivial. The other one, Fazilka, is also not trivial. 2 more, there's a Kasur Nala, and there's Salim Shah drain. Now these 4 are mentioned in the treaty, but actually there are about 20 which are coming. because they are smaller tributaries. And I mentioned 3 paragraphs. One was paragraph 4 of Article 4. The other, are the 3, 4, and 8. Now, paragraph 8 allows India to discharge flood waters and other waters. Now, there is no definition of other waters, but it says flood waters and other waters into the empty beds of Ravi and Satluj. Because those 2 rivers have been taken by India and they are running dry now. So they say that, okay, those river beds are now empty, so they could be used to dispose of flood waters and other waters. And floods are occasional events, but other waters are also drains with similar kind of quality, and they are also getting into our environment. And then the language of treaty is very interesting because it says both countries can discharge their flood waters into these empty beds, and both countries can discharge other waters into these empty beds, and any impact on the other country by this discharge would not be contested by the country being impacted. So if Pakistan puts something in those drains and India gets impacted, India is not supposed to ask us that you impacted us. So if India does it, but the beauty is that those who have written the treaty, and if a lawyer is reading it, would see it a very fair clause for both countries. But those who have read geography, they would know that the slopes of the ground are such that Pakistan can never discharge their flood waters into Ravi or Satluj. India can. Pakistan can never discharge other waters in those empty rivers bed, but India can. So the people who read the treaty as a lawyer, they don't understand it unless they have read the geography. So there is a disconnect. Nobody understands the treaty as a whole. This is my observation, especially in the current situation, not just in Pakistan, but also in India. People cannot relate the consequences of the treaty which are happening on ground. Our delta is eroding, and it is eroding at a very fast rate. The treaty this is one of the most unscientific treaty ever drafted on this scale for water resources. Most unscientific. Now, I've written about it a few years ago. I think the Dawn published an article by the name of Ignoring Science. And there we mentioned that the treaty has a couple of preambles on which everything is based. One of the preambles is that water flowing into the sea is wasted and water flowing in the river is unused, so both countries should make best endeavors to let it not happen. Let there be no water flowing in the river and let there be no water so-called being wasted into the sea. And for that, a new English word was invented, escapage. Escapage into the sea. Now this word doesn't exist in Oxford Dictionary. I don't know if it does exist, if it exists now, but back then, or at least a few years ago, it did not. So that word was invented. Like escapage kind of gives you a negative feeling that somebody who escaped, like a prisoner escaped or someone, you know. So one of the preambles was that water flowing to the sea is wastage. So this is highly unscientific. It is very simple to understand that if there is a system in which something is coming and the same thing is going out, like water is coming into a system and water is leaving the system. If it is in a long-term average not balanced, for example, in a long-term average, more water is coming to the system and less water is going out of the system, what the system will do? system will keep on filling with water. And if more water is going out and less is coming in, the system will keep on losing its water. Mass balance, simple. And if water is not allowed to leave, it will start accumulating in the system. You must have heard the term waterlogging, SCARP projects. We have spent billions. Why? Because water is not leaving the system. It is accumulating in the landscape. And water, when it moves into our system, it's not moving alone. It has dissolved content and it has suspended content. Where does this dissolved and suspended content come from? Mostly from the mountains. Now again, those who have not read that, those who deal with the treaty, they are mostly not aware of the geography and geology of the region. Your mountains, the highest mountains, the biggest mountains of the world, they are old seabeds. About 50 million years ago, they were formed as a consequence of continental collision. And those seabeds, they turned high up towards the sky, and those mountains, the layers of rocks which are forming those mountains are kind of marine origin. Marine origin means that they contain a lot of salts. And when the waters flow from those mountains, they bring with them all the dissolved salts. Moreover, glaciers is one of the biggest erosion force. The monsoon rains, they cause a lot of erosion, and a lot of sand and silt is part of the water which is flowing. So sand and silt plus dissolved salts, they move with this water. And in the natural state, Indus used to collect almost 50,000 or maybe 50 million tons of salts every year and would dispose it off into the sea. Now when the water is not going into the sea, about 50 million tons of salts are accumulating in your landscape. You must have heard the word salinity, destroying our lands. Also an outcome of the same unscientific reasoning for the treaty. And then the silt. In geological terms, if there is a landscape which is eroding, like our mountains, which are leaving all that silt, that is an erosional landscape. With every erosional landscape, there is a complementary depositional landscape. Again, mass balance. So, if mountains are still eroding, where that deposition is going? In the natural state, the ultimate depositional regime was your delta. And because of that deposition continuously being brought by the river, the delta was actually advancing into the sea until the 1830s and 50s. It was advancing into the sea. And now after you have blocked your rivers, you have also blocked the silt, which was life-giving to the delta. The mangroves forest and all the species which thrived in that ecosystem. It could not survive without silt. Now that silt is being trapped in the large dams, both in India and Pakistan. That silt is being deposited and in the upstream of the diversion barrages, and that silt is being diverted into the irrigation canals. And wherever that silt is going, it is creating problems. Sakhar barrage, if you have recently visited, several of its gates are clogged because of the deposition of silt upstream. The canals, they get silted up, and every year you have to do that so-called bhalsify. And the dams, they are getting silted up. You raise the walls of Mangla because it got silted up, and it's being silting, it's still silting. Tarbela is more than 40% silted. And now they are building Dimar Basha. They say now Dimar Basha will stop the silt coming into Tarbela, but where it will go to settle? And Dimar Basha. So it is actually eating up the billions of dollars that you invested, And all because of one simple scientific mistake, not to let the water go to the sea. You are losing your delta. Now, delta of a river system is considered a jewel box. Communities living elsewhere on the river deltas are some of the richest in the world. Rotterdam is probably the richest city in Europe. It's on the delta of Rhine River. Alexandria in Egypt, that's the delta of Nile, the richest city. Similarly, if you go to any other city which is close to river delta, from the US coast to other parts of the world, they are very rich cities. But if you go to Indus Delta, this is the poorest of the poorest places in Pakistan. Because the sea waves are coming in, the life-giving silt has been stopped, the mangrove forests are disappearing. And mangrove forests, when I talk about the global significance of this river system, mangrove forests are one of the most important carbon sinks in the world. And in the world today of climate change, we need more carbon sinks than ever before. This was the 5th largest mangrove forest in the world. It has reduced to only 8% of its original size. And the capacity of carbon sequestration of a mangrove forest is 7 times more than that of a rainforest per square or per unit area. So it is such an important system that has been destroyed. Then the species that thrive in the deltaic environment, in the roots of the mangroves, the deep sea species, they come and spawn in the mangroves. Their offsprings, they find a safe haven, they grow up there and they move down to the deep seas. And this connection, we don't know how it relates, but at least we know that we don't know that that these connections do exist. And all the way to Antarctica, because species are connected. Similarly, from delta upstream, we have this blind dolphin. You must have heard about it. Now, why blind dolphin is blind? Because dolphins, they do have this acoustic system of finding objects in waters. And if the waters are murky, the acoustics work better. And if a species which lost its eyes and developed more of its that acoustic sensory system, sonar system. Now, how did it evolve? Because these waters were always murky, and it had a competitive advantage on the other species that when those species cannot see with their eyes, this can actually move around with sonar. So the very existence of blind dolphin is a testimony to the fact that Indus is bringing a lot of silt for millions of years, because the species, they don't evolve in a couple of thousand years or even in millennia. It takes millions of years for species to evolve. So this is the kind of beautiful river system that without fully understanding its nature and its significance, we destroyed it. The second thing about Indus Water Treaty, which I call is highly unscientific, is the idea of greening the deserts. When this water war between India and Pakistan started in 1948, and in 1951 the World Bank jumped in, and in 1953, for the first time, Pakistan and India tabled their positions in front of the World Bank, that what exactly India wanted and what did Pakistan want. So Indian position was that they wanted all the waters from Ravi, Satluj and Beas, which are called eastern rivers in the treaty, And they also wanted 7% waters from the western rivers, which was Chenab, Jhelum, and the Indus. So that was the initial position of India. Pakistan's initial position was that they wanted all the water of the western rivers, which is Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab, and they could give up to 30% waters to India from the eastern rivers, which were Beas, Ravi, and Satluj. So those were the initial positions. Now, one of the questions was asked from the Indians, why you want so much water? You don't need that much water. You already are not running short of water. Why you want so much water? And they came up with an idea that we don't want these waters for now, we want it for future. And Jawaharlal Nehru said that we want to green the Rajasthan desert, which is our future breadbasket and an insurance for the food security. Therefore, we want those waters. Now, the delegates from the World Bank and probably from Pakistan, they somehow got convinced that, okay, they need a lot of water for greening the desert. But deserts don't get green by building canal network in there. What is unscientific here is that before all the canal network which was built by the British, that was built on the alluvial environment, alluvial plains, which are spread out very smoothly on very mild slopes. They create very mild slopes in the floodplains which are laid out by the rivers. Geologically, we call them alluvial landscapes. Deserts are not alluvial landscape. Deserts are aeolian landscapes which are made by the wind deposits. And the wind deposits do not create plains with mild slopes where canals can run. We accepted it, and the World Bank accepted it, and after the treaty, 65 years, you go and again just see how Rajasthan desert fares with those canals. The southern part of Rajasthan canal, which is actually into the Rajasthan desert, not the northern part, because the canal starts from the mountains, passes through the plains of Ravi, Beas and Satluj and Sarsavati river, which we call Hakra river. After passing through all those plains, it enters into the original Rajasthan desert. The area is not insignificant. It is about 4 million acres. And in that area, the main feeder canal is more than 490 kilometers with a network of more than 9,000 kilometers of irrigation canals. And if you look at the satellite, the desert is still a desert. Those canals have been buried under the sand dunes. You can go and Google it. We did a little bit more scientific study of that area. There's something called normalized moisture index. We studied that. The values are, for those who are interested, the value of the moisture index are +1 to -1. Any value above 0.4 means that there is sufficient moisture in the vegetation. Between 0.2 and 0.4, the vegetation is under stress. Between 0 and 0.2, it is highly stressed, and below 0 negative values, that means there is no moisture. 99% of the desert is without moisture. Less than 1% is above 0.4. So, again, you took 3 rivers away from their natural courses. I won't say from us, because I hate saying us and them. You took 3 rivers away from their natural courses, took it to a landscape where the rivers did not belong. You destroyed the rivers and you did not get anything. So that was the second most unscientific part, which was accepted by all the so-called negotiating teams of the treaty. It was never contested, as far as I have read the history, it was never contested by anyone that these two are unscientific things. One unscientific thing came from, as far as I know, from Mr. Nehru, who was obviously not a hydrologist, he was not a water expert, he was not an environmentalist, he was just a statesman. The other unscientific thing came letting the river not flow into the sea. It came from a lawyer. His name was Lilienthal, David E. Lilienthal. So David E. Lilienthal was an interesting character. He was sent to Pakistan by, as far as the cover story goes, or the story goes, he was sent to Pakistan and India in 1951 by Collier magazine. This sponsored his trip. And he came, met with the prime ministers of the two countries, visited these places, and wrote 2 articles in Collier magazine. Now, Collier magazine is, interestingly, a lifestyle magazine, like you see this Vanity Fair or Cosmopolitan, or that was the kind of magazine in which he wrote 2 articles to inform American people what was going on between India and Pakistan. The first essay was titled, "Are We Losing India?" That was published in June of 1951. In that article, he argues that Kashmir is a gateway for Soviet Russia, Red Tibet, and Red China to enter into the fertile resources of India and Pakistan and all the way to Arabian Sea. So the dispute on Kashmir, the idea of plebiscite was not to be implemented. The dispute, in other words, should remain there. He ridiculed the idea of plebiscite by calling it counting noses in Kashmir. And he said, counting noses in Kashmir will not solve any problems. The problem between the two countries is of water, which is again neither a political problem nor a religious problem. It is a financial problem and an engineering problem. So everybody gets aside and let the financial managers and engineers decide what to do. Totally against the norms of planning. You include all stakeholders. This treaty was based on excluding the stakeholders, just the engineers and the financial managers. Then, another interesting thing he writes in that essay is that since China has already drifted into the communist bloc after independence, let India not do the same. And if India also drifts into the communist bloc, then we are going to lose Asia because we have already lost China. So let India not drift into the communist bloc. And he writes about Nehru, mentions one of the meetings with him, and he says, Nehru told me that a politician who is honest like Gandhi, or a prophet for that matter, would always talk about truth and stand for the truth. But I am neither Gandhi nor a prophet. I am a statesman and I have to make decisions on day-to-day basis. He further says that Nehru is a wonderful guy and he will win the 1953 upcoming elections, nevertheless. And as long as he's in power, we should work with him and set the trajectory for US-India relations, which will go a very long way. He met Liaquat Ali Khan and he writes about Liaquat Ali Khan that he is a mild-mannered and soft-spoken person, but his words are very firm. And he says that Liaquat Ali told me that Kashmir could be a luxury for India, but necessity for Pakistan. So this was 1951, June. Remember this date. In the August of 1951, he writes another essay titled Another Korea. And this time he argues that if Pakistan takes her case to the international courts, where India was threatening to stop the waters from flowing into Pakistan, and Pakistan invokes her rights of lower riparian, Pakistan has a very strong case to support herself and Pakistan will win. And he advises that this should not happen, because if Pakistan wins the case, now remember he's a lawyer, okay? He says that if Pakistan wins the case, the war will break out. And if war breaks out, because Pakistan is a Muslim country, more Muslim countries will jump in, and Russia will also jump in, and America will be forced to jump in, and a situation like Korea would develop again, and let it not happen. We should prevent Pakistan from going to seek justice at the international level. And then, in the same month, August of 1951, late August, he writes a letter to the then president of the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, which is now called the World Bank. Their president was Eugene Black. So he writes a letter to Eugene Black that there are opportunities, now mark these words, that there are business opportunities for the bank in the water dispute between India and Pakistan, and you must write to their prime ministers to talk to you. And then in the September of 1951, Eugene Black writes exact same letter to both the prime ministers and offers them his offices to come and discuss this water dispute between the two countries. No formula was given, no condition was presented, it's just that he offers that come and discuss it here. Liaquat Ali accepted it first, and few days later, Nehru also accepted it. That was September of 1951. In the October of 1951, Liaquat Ali was assassinated, and in the first week of November of 1951, a letter from World Bank comes to the two countries in which the rules of engagement are written. There are a few points in those rules, but I'll talk about a couple of important ones. It said that you are allowed to participate in the discussion that will continue from now onward only if you forego your rights as a lower riparian that Pakistan had. You will not go to seek international justice, and only then you are allowed to participate in these discussions. Now, in other words, Pakistan had this condition that if they forego their rights as a lower riparian, only then they will be allowed to come and discuss it. And if they agree not to seek justice at the international level, they will be allowed to discuss it. So you had to, those were your strongest points. So you had to actually surrender your most important weapon before you enter into the negotiations. And then they said that you will not talk about past, because past invokes the rights of the lower riparian. So you are told not to talk about the past, that we are already using this water and we have plenty of evidence that we are using it, and our dependence is on the eastern rivers that India wants to take. So you had to forego that one as well. And you will only talk about future. So this is how we entered into those negotiations in the offices of World Bank. And now, as I mentioned earlier, in 1953, for the first time, the two countries, they stated their positions. After that, there were few rounds of discussions in Washington, Karachi, New Delhi. I think there were 3 rounds of discussions, and no country moved an inch from their initial position. And then came General Wheeler. He worked for World Bank, a former Corps of Engineers officer from American Army. He came in and he said that these two countries will never agree to anything sensible or whatever. And he said, here's the international border. let India develop everything on this side and let Pakistan divide everything on this side, which implied that India gets 100% of the eastern rivers and Pakistan gets 100% of the western rivers. Now, there was some give and take in General Wheeler's formula. India was foregoing their share that they wanted from the western rivers, and Pakistan was foregoing the 70% that they demanded from the eastern rivers. Now, it is now very interesting to note that this happened in 1954, and India readily accepted this formula. And they said, okay, we accept, we forego our demand on the western rivers. If we get all the eastern rivers, we are good to go. Pakistan objected. Pakistan said, no, we cannot give you all the three rivers. No one shuts down a river completely. Environmental flows and some other flows must keep on coming. But Indians, they were happy that they could close all the three rivers. And otherwise, it was unprecedented then and even up till today that a river of that size has been completely shut down. And it was not one, it was three rivers, each rivaling the size of Colorado River. All three were to be shut down. So Pakistan continued with the discussions, and Pakistan wanted more from the eastern rivers. Then in 1960, the treaty was signed. And the conditions were, okay, India gets 100% eastern rivers, India also gets 7% of the western rivers, and India gets permission to discharge all the sewage into Pakistan through those 4 drains, actually 20, something they never asked even in their initial position. So they got more than what their initial position was. So I don't even call it a treaty, because treaty means that the two parties, they have initial positions and they meet somewhere in between. If they are not right in the center, they are slightly here, but still somewhere in between. Then it's a treaty. No, it's not a treaty. It's a capture or a complete surrender from the other side. It's not a treaty. And how come this happened? This is something very interesting. Pakistan was getting replacement works when the India was diverting those rivers. And it was all happening before even signing a treaty. So anything that India was doing in order to divert the 3 eastern rivers, wholly or partly, was against the international norms. And that is why the World Bank wanted that Pakistan should never go to the international forums, because not only India was violating international norms, the World Bank and the American companies working in India on those projects were also partners in crime. This guy, David E. Lilienthal, he had been head of the Tennessee Valley Authority in the USA. He resigned from his position. Now, Tennessee Valley Authority is like WAPDA. They have these dams and barrages and, that multi-purpose dams, hydropower, irrigation, navigation, everything. So that was a model on which this WAPDA was created. After resigning from Tennessee Valley Authority, he made his own company. He wanted to do business, and his company was working on the development projects, especially water-related projects, in mostly third world countries. And his company was also working at this time in India on the projects which were shutting down Pakistan's water without any treaty. So Lilienthal's concern that Pakistan should never go to the international court was very genuine. It was his interest that this thing should never go to international court, because otherwise his company too would be in trouble. getting World Bank in is another conflict of interest by Lilienthal, because Lilienthal was also working for Lazard Frères as a consultant, and Lazard Frères in turn was an investment consultant for the World Bank. And this has been written in that, mentioned in the book by Alice Albinia, Umpires of the Indus. And she also mentions that there were some British memoirs in which it was written that Lilienthal is kind of, whatever he's suggesting is clear conflict of interest. But they said that it does not impact us, so let him do it. And Lilienthal was basically, what he was doing, he was, although he was sent by Collier magazine, but it is said, again, in Alice Albinia's book, I read it, that he was briefed by the State Department before visiting this part of the world. Now, it was Cold War, everything was done covertly. Lifestyle magazines sponsoring his trip, coming to Pakistan, meeting the prime ministers as a private citizens, making suggestions, blah, 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 blah. All those things. So, end of the day, this was the Cold War agenda. This treaty was a Cold War agenda to keep India in hand, stop Pakistan from going to international courts. And then the third thing, this Bank of Reconstruction and Development, the International Monetary Fund, and the United Nations, these three institutions, they just popped up on the surface of the globe after the World War II. And in World War, towards the end of the World War II, I think it was 14th of August 1941, when Atlantic Charter was signed. And in that charter, it was decided that all the colonies will be freed, and they will form their own governments, they will be independent, and they will be then controlled by the financial institutions. And these two institutions, World Bank and IMF, they were seeking their clients in those countries. The clients were mostly their governments, where they could actually put huge loans in those countries, invest huge loans in those countries. And if you have a lot of loan taken from an IFI, International Financial Institution, then they can dictate you their terms. No wonder we are being still dictated by the terms. And one of the most favorite way to give a huge sum of money to another country as loan was mega construction projects, and dams were their favorite. That is why Lilienthal, that is why all those dams and stuff. And then came dams in the Indus Water Treaty. India got 3 dams, Bhakra Dam on Satluj, Pong Dam on Beas, and Theen Dam on Ravi. Pakistanis, they did not get any dam. And the World Bank engineers, they assessed that the irrigation system of Pakistan is a run-of-the-river system, and you really don't need large reservoirs to run this system. But then Pakistanis, they said, well, dams are, big source of loan money, and we should also get dams. And after some debate, it is written somewhere that Pakistani engineers convinced the World Bank engineers that Pakistanis do need dams. And World Bank was actually interested in giving dams to Pakistan, but not just like that. They said that, okay, finally we will give you 2 dams, which ultimately came up as Mangla and Tarbela. But for that, you have to sign the treaty. Without that, we are not going to give it to you. Now, why was World Bank interested in doing that? Because of the international law. And Pakistanis, quite frankly, General Ayub Khan was very much interested in getting that huge sum of money and do the development in Pakistan. Dams had always been a big political, symbol of progress because they are big. So it works almost everywhere in the world. From USA to Ghana, a dam would stand tall. Anyway, so they said that unless you sign the treaty, we are not going to let you build dams. Before that, they had given us money to build link canals and barrages and canal networks. Those are all small projects, but these two were really big things. So at that time, the understanding was that since India had already agreed to General Wheeler's formula, we will sign the treaty as per General Wheeler's formula. But when India learned that now Pakistan is seeking that money and they have agreed to sign the treaty, the Indians said, okay, now that you want to sign the treaty that you refused to sign in 1954, you are not getting any dams on the western rivers. Now, because you are getting dams on the western rivers, we will have our share of 7% from the western rivers. And Ayub Khan was advised that please don't get those two dams, because those two dams are permanent and the rivers that you are giving away, those two dams are temporary, but the rivers that you are going away are permanent, because dams get silted up. They have a limited life. Therefore, but Ayub Khan did not budge. He says, no, in any case, we have to get those dams. And Indians said, okay, now you get those dams, we get our 7% share. And on top of those 7% share, they also included these wastewater drains. They says, we will also send these wastewater. You will take care of our wastewater as well. Despite all the advices against this from some sane Pakistanis, Ayub Khan went ahead. One of the two most vocal voices against Ayub Khan from the political side was Ms. Fatma Jinnah, and from the bureaucratic side was Masood Khadarposh. And about Masood Khadarposh, it is said that Ayub Khan told him to keep his mouth shut or he will shoot him. And he said that I will actually shoot you myself. Those were the kind of conversations which have been mentioned in some historical accounts. So anyway, the treaty was signed. India got more than their initial position, and what we got was two dams. Really dams. They have damned us. So this is how this treaty went ahead. Now, I look at this treaty from the perspective of a lower riparian. I had been involved in some of the transboundary negotiations across the world, in countries like Australia, US, Canada, and in countries like Syria and Iraq and Jordan, and of course between Pakistan and Afghanistan, track to diplomacy and stuff. So what I have seen is that all these treaties which are signed on the sharing or management of river systems, transboundary river systems, all these treaties, they are only required by the lower riparians. Upper riparians don't need any treaty. They can do whatever they want. Whatever they do, the lower riparians are impacted. And whatever lower riparians do, upper riparians are not impacted. So it is the protection and the rights of the lower riparian for which treaties are signed. There are three major things from which the protection and the rights of lower riparians are invoked. Number one is damming. If you dam a river, it disrupts the flow pattern. Even if the dam is run of the river, it is releasing the water, but it can control the timings of the river flow. And the civilization which is built around the river is based on the natural rhythm of the flows. The ecology, the geology, the culture, environment and economy, everything is built with the rhythms of the river. So a treaty prevents the lower riparian from excessive damming. Second, the treaty prevents you from diversions. That somebody should not take your water away. Third, the treaty prevents you from excessive dredging. That somebody should not take your water away. Fourth, the treaty prevents you from excessive dredging. That somebody should not take your water away. 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 The third, the city prevents a lower riparian from pollution. What did Indus Water Treaty do? It allowed India to build indefinite number of dams on eastern and western rivers. There is no cap on the number of dams. Of course, there are annexures in the city which put some clauses that, okay, you will not do this much of storage or that much of storage. But if you build small storage which conforms to the provisions of the treaty, but you built 20 of them, instead of building one, you build 20 of them, then the impact is added up and maybe more than one large dam. So, unlimited number of dams allowed. Diversions. India could only practically do diversion of the eastern rivers, not the western rivers, because eastern rivers run through the plains before they enter into Pakistan, and it is very easy to divert a river in plains. But if there's a mountain range and here is the border, you can't simply dam it here and take it here because there are all mountains. And those who have not seen those mountains, by the way, those who are unaware of geology and geography of the region, for them it is very easy to believe when somebody runs a slide and says, hey, this river is coming here and we will cut it here and bring it here. And then, you see, we will divert all the water from Indus into India. You must have read that, must have come across that. So it is easy to do it on a PowerPoint. But on ground, if you go to Indus, the parts where it is in the Indian controlled territory, the temperature is so low for 6 to 7 months of the year that the diesel would freeze in the engines of your machines. You can't even work there. The environment is so harsh and tough. So, people who do not understand geology and geography and those who have not traveled to those parts of the world, they cannot even imagine how difficult it is. So, diversions from the western rivers, because of the sheer size of those mountains and the cost it involves and the kind of engineering it requires, even if all those things are made possible, the cost is so much that you would rather prefer to go to moon rather than divert a few odd acre feet of water into your country. So it is financially and engineering, and engineering point of view, it's an impossible job. So whatever they could divert was allowed to them. They said 7% diversion from the western rivers. In 65 years, they have not been able to divert 7%. And this is what Modi was saying a few years ago, that Pakistan is taking our share of water. And we will make sure that Pakistan is not able to get even a drop from our share. We are giving water to Pakistan, which is our share. He's mentioning to those leftover billion cubic meters of water, that is their share and they cannot divert it. So if they hold the treaty in abeyance, don't expect that next morning they will do it, because they have not been able to divert even a few percent of that water in 65 years. In other words, whatever diversion the upper riparian could do, more than that was allowed in the treaty. So the treaty did not save the lower riparian from diversions. It did not save us from damming. It did not save us from diversions. And the third thing is pollution. The upper riparian was allowed to put anything and everything in as much quantity as possible into our rivers, into our environment, into the river system as possible. So the treaty did not save the lower riparian from anything. And the treaty did not move an inch towards us. Actually, it moved further into the position of the upper riparian. And the third and the most important, interesting thing, that why I don't consider it a treaty, is that this treaty was not initially on the 19th of December 1960, it was not signed as an international treaty. It was a condition which was to be met by Pakistan in order to get the funding from the World Bank. And it was signed, a document was signed where Pakistan agrees that everything, every violation of international law that has happened in India is with the permission of Pakistan in order to cover that legal part, and it had to go as an annexure in the funding agreement. So this so-called treaty was an annexure to a funding agreement between the World Bank and Pakistan, and it had nothing to do with India. It was just a funding agreement, part of a funding agreement. And India was not part of that funding agreement. So this is how this so-called treaty came into being. And because it was signed by the heads of states, in 1962, India took this part to United Nations Register of International Treaties and requested that it should be made part of an international treaty for future. Pakistan did not object, and in 1962, this annexure of the funding agreement became part of the UN Register of International Treaties. And now, when they say we are holding it in abeyance, oh wow, what an opportunity for us. What an opportunity for us to invoke our rights as lower riparians at the international forum, in the International Court of Justice, a right that we've had to forego in order to be part of this treaty. We have a golden opportunity to reclaim our rights. We have a golden opportunity to stop our neighbor from polluting our environment, to stop our rivers from being polluted, and to let the rivers flow back into our country. We have a right, we have an opportunity to now go in an international court and make a case that India took these three rivers in order to make Rajasthan green, which they have completely failed to do so. And if they have failed, for the reason they took the three rivers, they should return it back to us with damages. That is the kind of very strong case that we can actually make. And I think the legal position and the legal instruments that Pakistan can now invoke after this treaty goes in abeyance, and not by us, by them. So no one can even blame you for breaching an international treaty. So an opportunity like this would never come again. And if we want that our children who are drinking that dirty water for the past 65 years, that thing should finish. Today is the time that we should move. Else, our next 3 generations will also grow drinking that water with, turned limbs, abnormal growth, liver and kidney diseases, eyesight diseases, you name it. That's happening there for the last 65 years. We don't want it to continue. This is the opportunity. Our legal position is stronger than what we had in 1948. We should move. And that's what I'm saying on every forum, that we have a golden opportunity. We should move. We should move, and we should move legally against India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for such an insightful talk. On the face of it, it seems to me that a very unfair treaty has been made. In your opinion, what could be done at that time that Pakistan could do, considering all the circumstances that you have mentioned, World Bank, capital issue, or financial issues? So what could be done best at that time to avert these catastrophic issues? Thank you.
Character is the first line of defense. If your leadership does not have the character, nothing would work. And the money, the military, or anything else comes later. We could have done much better. We could have simply walked to international court. There was a case of international crime that was committed when they shut down your canals in 1948. According to Geneva Convention, it was a war crime, because Geneva Convention says that under no political or wartime conditions you can disrupt the drinking water supplies of the civilian population, their agricultural infrastructure and their food production systems. You can't do that. And these canals were shut on the orders of the then East Punjab Chief Minister Gopal or something, and it was reinforced by Nehru. We could have simply taken these two guys in ICC, that they have committed a war crime. And even today, if any responsible person from India makes a statement that we won't let a single drop of water flow into Pakistan, they are showing a clear intention of committing a war crime. Anyone who makes such a statement, we should go and register a case against that person, that this person is showing the intentions of committing a war crime which must be prevented. We are very, very safe in doing this. But again, if you see today, we have options, but probably we are still lacking character.
Such a useful talk. Sir, I heard I think in 2022 that Modi want to modify the Indus Treaty. Today they say that they hold the treaty in abeyance due to Pahalgam attack, but in 2022 they still wanted to modify it. So if the treaty fully favor Modi's government, so why they want to modify and why they want to do this thing? Thank you.
This is a very interesting question, and it relates to the populace of India and Pakistan both. Soon after the treaty was signed, there was a rhetoric built in both countries. In India, the rhetoric was that Indians only got 20% of water and Pakistanis got 80% and water, and had this treaty not been there, India could have stopped all the water and taken everything. But this treaty has prevented us from doing it. On the Pakistani side, the rhetoric was that this treaty saved us from becoming a desert. Whatever we are getting is because of this treaty, and had this treaty not been there, India would have stopped all our waters. We grew up with that rhetoric. We grew up with that rhetoric since our childhood. I mean, how many people above 65 years of age? Maybe just a few. Okay, 65 years ago, you were children. So, so we were not told. I mean, what I am telling you today, it's all written in the history. Ever heard the name of Lilienthal? No. He wrote essays which transformed Pakistan, and nobody even knows, and they are available on the web, by the way. You do the Google search. Collier magazine shut down its printing, I think, in 1958. But these essays of 1951, they are still there. So, I mean, we were not told the truth. So, Modi Sahab was also a child. He also grew up the same way, with the same mindset and with the same beliefs that this treaty gave a huge advantage to Pakistan, and India lost the capacity to shut down their waters overnight. I'm sure Moody has not studied geography. Like most of us, who are and the custodians of Indus Water Treaty, they never studied geography, because had they studied the geography alone, they would have not believed that India can shut down our waters. So Moody thought that the moment I will say that I am holding this treaty in abeyance, the Indian engineers will come and shut down the waters of Pakistan, and Pakistan will go in trouble. And we thought the same. You know?
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. It's always a pleasure talking, listening to you. Well, I got the impression, so far I got the impression that, the dams, which have been, made, they do not carry that much weightage, whatever the people think that way. Bhasha and Dhyamir and, the Kalabag Dam was also not made, and, now the canals are creating a lot of problem as far as the Sindh is concerned. So I'd like to divert your little intentions towards Pakistan's problem, that what to do next as far as your water resources are concerned, and how to move around as far as the electricity. Our poor people are, paying a lot of money as far as the bills are concerned. That is a serious problem. So what to do next? What do you suggest that way? Thank you.
Sir, you had been my teacher, and I'm so honored for your presence here in the first place, and then asking this very important question. And I think this is a question, it's in everybody's mind. We have the opportunities, sir, a lot of opportunities. We just need to invoke the models of river water economy that are suited to the hydrology of the Indus Basin. Unfortunately, from the times of British, we applied the model of Mesopotamia. That was a 10,000 years old model, slightly modified by pharaohs 6,000 years ago, and then slightly modified by British by creating some concrete structures. Basically not concrete. 200 years ago, it was brick masonry structures inside the river beds, and that was again about 200 years ago. So we have developed our river system on the models which are not suitable for Indus. Indus is a very superior river compared to all these other rivers. I have persons sitting here with me who have worked in maybe 14, 15 river basins of the world. And when we compare Indus, Indus is a very superior river system. So we have to apply not the Colorado River models that came after Indus Water Treaty, or the previous models of pharaohs and Egyptians and Mesopotamians. We have to invoke the models which are suitable for the Indus. Now, what those models are? Number one, our prime economic engine running on Indus should be navigation, because Indus River connects Arabian Sea with the largest landlocked region in the world, which is Central Asian states. Some of them are rich states. And in between, there is Afghanistan. Now, river as an instrument of peace is through the navigation, because everyone connected on that navigational corridor is your friend and would live in peace. There are historical examples of this one. They built this Erie Canal in USA, connecting New York through a canal to Lake Erie, and then all the way through the Great Lakes to the Midwest. Before, this trade was being done through the port of New Orleans, down south. But when they built this canal, the maritime route cut short by about, I think, 3,000 kilometers. And New York became a preferred port of call, and the ships coming to New York and then through Erie Canal all the way to Midwest would do better than the ships going to port of New Orleans and through Mississippi River to Midwest. Now, this slight advantage not just made New York the capital of the new world, but in a few years' time, it became the financial capital of the world. And it still enjoys that status. So Erie Canal made Big Apple, which is the name they use for New York. And then in the War of War of Independence in 1860s, all the states which were connected by Erie Canal network, they were on one side. And it is written by some historians that it is Erie Canal which kept the Union intact. That is the power of navigation. That's a recent example. Another thing, China is an old civilization, and all the parts of old civilizations on the planet are now divided in smaller countries. Look at Rome and Europe, so many different countries. Look at Middle East, so many different countries. Look at Central America, so many different countries. But China is still one country. Why? It is the Grand Canal of China which is responsible for this. They have two rivers. One is Yangtze River, which is in the south. One is Yellow River, which is in the north. So north depended on south for food production. So what they used to do first was they would produce food, and I'm talking of more than 1,000 years ago. They would produce food and they would run it through the Yangtze River, go in the open ocean, and then enter into Yellow River and take it to north. So that is how the two regions were connected through navigation. And then there was an emperor who said that because of the bad conditions in the sea, there were pirates and there were storms and everything, somebody suggested that we can connect these rivers through a navigation canal. And I think 2,500 years ago, they built this Grand Canal. They invented locking gates on this canal 1,500 years ago maybe, or 1,200 years ago. So that Grand Canal, 1,100 miles of canal, it connected the two rivers inland. So the ships would go, boats would go through the canal without entering into the sea. And the two parts of China remained connected. The Grand Canal, by the way, is still operational. It's a navigation canal. So navigation is the strongest engine which connects people and brings peace. And if we invoke this engine of navigation in the Indus River system, Afghanistan, a troubled place, would start earning money, will be dependent on us, and we will be their friends and they will be our friends. We are treating the symptoms and we are not addressing the cause. The cause of all that conflict and terrorism and cross-border and Western blah, 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 blah is because people are poor. They don't have secure means of earning money. There is no such thing as racism or religion or sects or anything, nothing like that. People don't care about it when they are in good business. So let people do business. The potential of Jalalabad in Afghanistan, if connected to Arabian Sea, is that of Rotterdam in Europe. So that's the kind of potential we can invoke. And you see, again, not just Lilienthal's idea was scientifically wrong, it is also economically wrong. Because more than 90% of trade and commerce of the world is happening in the sea at any given time. In other words, there's tons of dollars are floating in the oceans. You can open a door and let them into your house as well, which is a river delta and upstream going into the river. We are trying our best to keep that door shut so that dollars don't move in. If we do that, if we understand that, and it's not difficult, it doesn't take a lot of money. It's cheaper than building 6 canals because you just have to build one still canal. which could be fed by affluent groundwater from the drains, connected to Kotri, and upstream, there is always water in the river. It's possible. So I would say that Indus should be developed with its own potential. The second potential of Indus, people would say that, that means we stop, if we have to let the boats flow into the river, where would the canal water go, blah, blah, blah. And our irrigation might be impacted. No. The other thing that Indus has and no other river system has at this scale is its riverine aquifer. Now, riverine aquifer is the groundwater which is right under the bed of the river. Few river systems have as continuous and as large storage in their riverine aquifers as does Indus. As we sit here and speak at this point in time, we have a very conservative estimate. We have 500 million acre feet of water stored under the river beds. How much is 500 million acre? Tarbela plus Mangla is about 13. Dimar Basha is less than 7. Kalabagh would be 6. And here we are talking of 500. And that is already there. You don't have to do anything about it. It's already there. All you need to do is use a few sophisticated pieces of technology, get that water out, establish its sustainable limits, and supply it to anyone for any use, from agriculture to industry to domestic use. And the quality of that water, we did a recent experiment. We found that the quality of that water is better than these bottled waters. And you can actually do everything with this quality of water. And unfortunately, after doing all those treaties and all those billions of dollars of engineering, you are letting your people drink the water which is not even fit for the animals. So we have the opportunity, we have the ways to move forward, but we have to treat Indus as the Indus is. And we have the ways to manage our things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sab, for your insightful talk. Based on your view, जो मैं समझा हूँ वो ये कि जो Indus Treaty है, that is actually is not the case of Pakistan and India. It's actually जो आपने initially talk को build किया कि ये तो planet के survival का मसला है. So ये तो इसका मतलब है कि ये तो बहुत बड़ा एक केस है अगर आप इसको लीगल पर्सपेक्टिव से देखते हैं. So मेरा आपसे सवाल ये है कि अगर ये इन्वायरमेंट का मसला है और ये हमारी सस्टेनेबिलिटी का मसला है तो पाकिस्तान ने फिर इस पर इनिशिएटिव क्यों नहीं लिया? आर वी, जैसे अभी आपने एक बड़ी अच्छी बात की कि दिस इज़ अ गोल्डन अपॉर्चुनिटी टू गो इनटू द इंटरनेशनल कोर्ट और इसको किया जाए. मेरा आपसे सवाल ये है, आर वी रेडी फॉर डैट? बिकॉज फॉर एग्जांपल हम कहते हैं हमने हमारा इतना डैमेज हुआ इन टर्म्स ऑफ लाइफ या पॉपुलेशन, क्या हमारे पास क्या इतनी इनक्रेडिबल स्टडीज़ मौजूद हैं डैट एक्चुअली प्रूव के पाकिस्तान को में जो ये ड्रेन्स का या जो वेस्ट का प्रॉब्लम इंडिया ने किया है पाकिस्तान उससे अफेक्ट हुआ है या नहीं, और वो हम उसको एस्टेब्लिश कर सकते हैं कि नहीं? मेरा दूसरा ये कि मेरा ताल्लुक जेलम से है, मैं साल्ट रेंज में मेरा गाँव है, तो वो डोमेस्टिक प्रॉब्लम जो मैं समझता हूँ कि जेलम रिवर है, लेकिन क्यों नहीं हम सिस्टम डेवलप कर सके? हमारे यहाँ अभी कोई वो बना रहे हैं कैनाल, लेकिन हमारा जो इलाका थल है या जो एरिया है वो बहुत ज़्यादा है, बट वो हम डेवलप नहीं कर सके उसको बिल्कुल. और वो जो लैंड है उससे हम सिर्फ जो है वो क्रॉप लेते हैं साल में, और वो भी बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं होती. तो वाई नॉट हम उससे फ़ायदा, हम उसे कहते हैं दराज जेलम, लेकिन उससे कोई बेनिफिट नहीं कर सके हम. जो स्पेशली अगर मैं जेलम की पॉपुलेशन देखता हूँ तो वो उससे कोई फ़ायदा नहीं ले सकी. अगर इस पर थोड़ा सा आप कमेंट कर दीजिएगा.
This is a good question because the problem is we have not been taught about the development models which are there for the river systems of the world. How water economy is developed elsewhere in the world on the river systems. This Rhine River, it's much smaller than Indus. But you know how much money it is making? more than all the money that Middle East is making from its oil. Similarly, Indus has the potential to make more money than Middle Eastern oil. And there are alternatives to oil. There is no alternative to water. We have the potential. We can do it. Who is stopping us? But unfortunately, the reason that I see is that we adopted a political regime. We got into a political situation on the international stage back in 1947-48 when this treaty was being signed, and we became kind of an instrument of Cold War. And that, unfortunately, that situation has not much changed. We are still an instrument of Cold War, which is now getting hotter. That's the problem. And unfortunately, I will say it very vocally, that the character of the leadership would matter. I mean, there are leaders in the world, they got a small space and they transformed their nations. You are getting a huge space and nobody is coming forward. You see, I am not the custodian of Indus Waters Treaty. I am here sitting and talking to you, covering every aspect possible. Where is Indus Commissioner? Where is Chairman WAPDA? Where is an official from the Irrigation Department? Where is the Minister for Water and Power? Do they even have this knowledge that I want to share with them? Do they have the experts in their departments? No, they don't want it. They just want to keep doing the politics. The same mentality which led us to sign the treaty just in order to get a few odd dollars. I'm sorry to say, the people who signed Indus Water Treaty, their third generation is ruling on us, sitting in the assemblies. And we are the third generation who is still paying the debts. We did a very elaborate study on the life cycle assessment of Tarbela Dam. And we found out that what they say is, 2 रुपए की बिजली मिलती है तरबेले से, that is 53 rupees when you do all these life cycle assessment. We have not yet been able to pay off the debt that we took from Tarbela Dam, for Tarbela Dam. This Neelam Jhelum project and other boondoggle, we did a study on this one too. And actually, there's more to that study. Back in 2019, sir, if I'm not wrong, it was 2019 that we did a program on Neelam Jhelum. That was the time it was being projected in the media that, hey, we built another hydropower dam, now this thing will happen, that thing will happen. Prime ministers and WAPDA chairman and everyone was going there and, cutting those ribbons and everything. We visited the place. We ran a program on Radio News Network. It's still available on the web. And after seeing the facility with my own eyes, we predicted that this facility is not going to live its life, which at that time was estimated as 45 years. And much before, even we were surprised, it did not even run for 2 years. Its tailor's tunnel collapsed, then its main tunnel collapsed. The facility is just sitting there. About $6 billion of direct loss, and you and me had been paying for it since 2003. WAPDA ke bill mein, Neelam Jhelum surcharge. And you will still be paying it. Every time there's a tax, the investors will get their money back because they have sovereign warranties from the government. So it is not that we cannot do it. We can do it, but the problem is not with any other thing, but with our character. That's the reason.
Thanks for this eye-opening discussion. I want to ask what happened to the bureaucrat who was against General Ayub?
I don't know what happened to him, but His name was Masood Khadarposh. I think he's been mentioned in some books like Shahabnama and stuff. They have mentioned about it. I could not trace his end, but I think he retired, and I don't know. I really don't know.
And then ultimately expired. Nothing happened to him as far as the youth fund is concerned.
Yeah.
Dr. Saab, while I agree with a lot of what you say, and obviously I've heard you say all of this before in your office last year when we were there, when you brought up a group of Polish professors who were investigating the China-Pakistan economic corridor and its environmental impact. But my problem is that you say, and I say that this as somebody with a degree in international economic law, you say that we can move the International Court of Justice. The problem with that is going to that forum, the first thing that forum will ask is that you have given up your right to move that forum. Now, anything you do regarding these three rivers has to be done through the mechanism provided in this treaty. So you are now, it would be a very difficult task to go anywhere else, to any other forum. Any other forum would ask you, the first thing they would ask you is that there is a mechanism within this treaty and you have to use that. You are now bound to use whatever mechanism is available in this, and there are two mechanisms, I believe. One is the court of arbitration, and then there is an appointment of an expert. And so without doing that, first of all, I don't think you can move any other forum. It would be very difficult to convince that forum to take it up. So even the suspension of this treaty will have to go through that forum, and you'll have to move that forum, because at the end of the day, you are not saying that this treaty has been suspended. So you agree to this treaty, you still agree to this treaty. So when you are agreeing to this treaty, you will have to go through the mechanism provided within this treaty. And secondly, international law is not as easy to implement as you say it is. We've already seen the case of Palestine. We've already seen the case of Palestine and how difficult it has been to stop the genocide through international court despite their judgment. So I don't know if we can do this as what you suggest. For me, it seems very difficult to move any other forum while this treaty is still in place and we accept it.
All things difficult start with a first step. Going to the moon was very difficult, but those who wanted to go there, they reached there. We have, now you see, I look at this way. There is a landscape with sick people. There is irrefutable scientific evidence that why these people are sick, and there is irrefutable evidence that a treaty supports the sickness of these people. The delta is eroding. It is eroding because no silt is going there, not enough water is going there. Your landscape is getting salinized because of a simple law of mass balance that's been violated. There is no one can refute that. That is number one. If evidence is there, then going to the court and making a case is the expertise of a lawyer. You know what Jinnah did? That's our legacy. He made a legal case to create Pakistan. Why can't we do that? If we have the will, we have all the instruments with us. The world is very conscious about environment. The world is very conscious about pollution. The world is very conscious about human rights. You go to a court of law and say this guy is polluting my water. Would the judge give decision in the favor of person who is polluting? Okay, that permission, this is a legal point, and this is why I am saying this is a huge opportunity. They have put it in abeyance, not us. And as long as we accept, okay, you put it in abeyance, We accept it, it's in abeyance, and we are going. Because the moment they put it in abeyance, they are not allowed to pollute our rivers. Because they can only pollute as long as the treaty is held. If they say it is not held or temporarily unheld, we can move forward. That is why I'm saying it's an opportunity to move and move very fast. We can do it. It's not impossible. Yes, it's difficult, but we can.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I just wanted to ask that by now the world is convinced that allowing the rivers to flow is a good thing for the nature also and for the economies also. Having realized this, why is this world still obsessed with building dams? You see them coming up in China, you see them coming up in Africa. We are obsessed with the same thing. We want to build dam at Kalabagh also. We are already building one at the Amar Bhasha also. So having understood the perils of a dam, why is the world still building them? And secondly, can we undo the dams in order to let's say, the Indus flow and take those salts and those sediments to the delta and create that positive effect that we want to happen over there? Thank you.
Okay, the world is building dams in the places where they think they can. And it is not because dams are something very useful for all. It is because of the interest groups. There are very, very powerful lobbies who make billions out of building a dam. And they are powerful enough to convince the decision makers that let's go for it. That's your share. Let me go. War is the most destructive thing in the world, but there are people who are benefiting from it. War industry is running with creating weapons and more deadly weapons and atom bombs and stuff. They are not being produced for free. People are making billions out of it. So dam is quite benign compared to the war industry, but nevertheless, those are the interest groups who are doing it. They can express, I mean, my voice can be very easily expressed. Just go to the decision maker, offer him something. My pockets are empty, I can't offer him something. I can just tell that this is wrong, this is not required. So that is one thing. Number two, the world has actually moved out of that obsession of building dams. In Europe, there's an organization called DRE, Dam Removal Europe, DRE. At an average, every fortnight a dam is removed in Europe. There's another organization in North America, American Rivers. They keep a track of the dam removal and almost the same frequency. A dam is being removed in North America once a fortnight. There's a recent article on Elva Dam in National Geographic. A large dam was removed. Okay. US Bureau of Reclamation, famously called BUREC, is the organization which has built the most number of dams in the world. They are the ones behind this Indus Waters Treaty. They built dams all over the world, and they built a number of dams in the United States. I think they were formed in 1903 or something, around that time. Don't quote this year, but around that time they were built with an aim. Their mission was to find places where they can dam the rivers and use it for irrigation and hydropower. In 1996, I think, or 1993, one of these years, their mission was changed. And it was to restore the environmental health of every river system, and a toolkit was developed in order to do that, and dam removal was part of the toolkit. This is how the global mind, science and engineering is changing. And I always say that those who are building dams like India and China, those are the two countries that always come up, that India and China are building dam, why not we? Why not we? Because when we can lead the leaders, why follow the followers?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Okay, nations which lacking in mathematics and geography, they will not develop their nations. ये तो और हमें ख़ुद डेल्टा का और किसी को भी कि यहाँ विजुअल कोई चीज़ डिस्प्ले नहीं हो रही, ना किसी को जोग्राफी का पता है. कुछ सिंध से गिला है इस बात का कि डेल्टा से लेके डाडू जो कुड्डू बिराज है वहाँ तक इन्होंने स्पॉइल किया है इंडस को. वहाँ किसी भी दुनिया में आप काफ़ी नॉलेज है कि जो विड्थ है रिवर का वो 5 माइल्स है, वहाँ पे 7 माइल्स भी है. और जो नहर स्विस वगैरह है वो उसमें इंटरनेशनल शिपिंग करते हैं 500 मीटर्स में. तो आप देखें कि हम किस तरह स्पॉइल कर रहे हैं. और तीसरी बात यह है कि हम शिपिंग बोटिंग वगैरह के लिए ड्रिजिंग का एक है वो किसी ने अडॉप्ट नहीं किया. और सिंध में तो और साधारण पंजाब में तो एक्सीवेटर लेके नहर की तरफ अपनी तरफ कर लेते हैं, जब सैलाब आता है तो भाग जाते हैं वहाँ से. तो ये हम खुद स्पॉइल कर रहे हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा नुकसान दे रहे हैं अपने पानी को. और जो इको सिस्टम डिज़ाइन है नेचुरल सिस्टम का है वो तो पानी जाना चाहिए डेल्टा में, समंदर में जाना चाहिए, क्योंकि सी फूड का उनकी वो रिक्वायरमेंट है. और इसके अलावा जो अरेबियन इंडियन ओशन से मानसून की हवाएं पानी लेके आएंगी दोबारा वापस, तो उनके लिए तो मस्ट है, उनको स्टॉप ही नहीं कर सकते. और तीसरा कीर्तर की पहाड़ियाँ से लेके कोई सलमान की स्लेटिंग बहुत ज़्यादा है जो हमारे KPK या इससे पंजाब से आ रही है, उसको तो स्टॉप कर दें. इवन होशाब के एरिए से भी बहुत ज़्यादा रेगिस्तान में ये मतलब है कि फिजिबिलिटी मैंने हर चीज़ से चाहिए. 150 फीट हाइट है आपकी सी लेवल की, ये पंजाब की DG खान तक, उससे ऊपर 500 फीट तक है. तो इसमें हम क्यों नहीं कर सकते कि बोटिंग ड्रेजिंग करके और स्ट्रीम लाइन करके और उसको स्क्वीज़ करके फिजिबल करके, और जो एक इंजन ट्रक का लेके जाता है वो बोट करके बहुत सारे कंटेनर्स लेके जाते हैं. कि ये पूरा एक केस फाइल है. थैंक यू, अगर इसको एलेबोरेट करें.
Sir, thank you very much for this very interesting account. This Indus navigation is it is possible. First thing, it is possible, and it has a history. You know, when is Alexander, so-called the Great, I always say so-called the Great, was beaten by people of Gujarat and Sialkot, he could not run back further west to the areas which he had conquered and established his governors. He was not allowed to move back. He was beaten and he had nowhere to run but take his boats in Jhelum River and down south. And he ended up in Multan and he was beaten again. And then he ran further south and ultimately he reached Indus Delta. Part of his troops, they took boats and through the Gulf, they reached Iraq, and he traveled from the coast of Makran to back to Iraq. He was injured, and by the time he reached there, soon he died. So this navigation kind of saved him, if not for good, but for a few days, for escaping. Yeah. So this navigation. Then there was this guy, Henry Barnford. He took a flat-bottom boat. I think the year was 1630 something. He took a flat-bottom boat from Ravi to Thatta. He traveled and he declared this reach of the river as navigable. About 100 years later, I think 1727, it was Alexander Hamilton. He traveled a few times between north reaches and south reaches, and he says that these rivers are navigable from Kashmir to Karachi. 1830s, this guy, Alexander Burns, he came down from Britain to actually make a very detailed survey of Indus for its feasibility for navigation. And he wrote very positive reports. And that was the time Talpurs were ruling Sindh, and Talpurs were very skeptical of British people. They would not allow them to travel north. The Portuguese, Italians, and these people, they were allowed to travel north, but not the British. And this British guy, he came with a cunning plan. He brought, I think, 4 horses or 5 horses of some very special breed, and he took them in the boat, and he requested Talpurs that let him travel north because they can't make these horses walk all the way. They are very special ones, and these are the gift for Ranjit Singh. And after being remaining for boat arrest for 3 months, finally they were allowed to take the horses up north, but they were carrying their survey equipment, and then they surveyed the rivers as they moved north. They met Ranjit Singh, presented him the horses, which by the way died after a few months. But he completed the survey anyway, and he wrote in his book, Travels to Bukhara. He writes the accounts of the river surveys that he did, and he declared these very optimistically navigable. And his optimism was so much that the British, they actually sent another group led by, I think, Leigh, Carl, Charles, and Huddle. These are 4 engineers who came, and they wanted to verify his survey. And the thing that the difference between Alexander's surveys and these guys was that these guys, they said that this riverbed is so wide that there are sandbars, which are shifting sandbars, and we have to do something about it, which Burns did not mention. And he said that the delta is so marshy that unless we do some significant engineering works to have a safe passage from the river passing through the delta into the open sea, the navigation would not be a feasible project to do. But today, the delta is already dry. So that concern is over. Sandbars are not moving that much, and the technologies has improved so much with dredging and still canals and everything that it is more feasible than Alexander Burns pointed out. So that possibility is there. There is a history to it. And if you go to Mithankot, by the way, you will see 3 large boats. Those are ships actually. They are grounded there. The name of one of the ships is Indus Queen. Go and see it. They are right in the middle of nowhere. Before that, of course, those are ships. They came floating on water. But water is, I mean, like at least 5 kilometers away. So this is how we have destroyed our river. This is how we are destroying our potential. But nevertheless, that potential is there, and we can regain it only if we want. Sir, please repeat the question on mic so that it comes on record.
If I want to go to the International Court of Justice to lodge my complaint against Pakistan and India, who are the signatory of this kind of treaty, which is violating my rights, will you be giving me your support, academic knowledge base to fight there?
Sure.